England, autumn, 1312. Cold rain drifted across the rolling hills of northern England as thick gray clouds covered the evening sky. Far beyond the villages, hidden among ancient forests and towering cliffs, stood the forgotten ruins of Black Hollow Abbey. For over 200 years, no one had dared to live there. Travelers claimed that every midnight, the old abbey bell rang 3 times, even though no monk had walked its halls for generations. Some believed ghosts guarded its stones. Others whispered that the abbey protected a secret so dangerous that kings had buried it from history itself. No one knew the truth. Nearly 50 miles away, inside Greyford Castle, 20-year-old Sir Thomas Graham finished another day of training. Unlike many knights, Thomas had never dreamed of glory. He believed a sword existed to defend the weak, not to satisfy ambition. His mentor, Sir Aldrich, often reminded him, the greatest knight is not remembered for the battles he wins, but for the lives he chooses to save. Thomas carried those words with him every day. That evening, a violent storm swept across the kingdom. Lightning flashed above the castle towers. Suddenly, the castle gates opened. A lone rider entered the courtyard. His horse was exhausted. His cloak was soaked with rain. Without speaking to anyone, the stranger walked directly toward Thomas. He removed a small leather tube sealed with black wax. Upon the seal was the symbol of an old monastery. Not the king's crest, not a noble family's mark. Something far older. The stranger quietly said, "This letter is for Sir Thomas Graham alone." Thomas broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of aged parchment. It read, "If Black Hollow Abbey remains silent for 7 more nights, England will lose its king. Come alone. Trust no one." There was no signature, only a strange symbol, a black bell. Up. The messenger had disappeared. No one had seen him leave. Only his horse remained standing in the rain. Sir Aldrich examined the letter. His face turned pale. He whispered, "I prayed I would never see that symbol again." Thomas frowned. "You know what it means?" Sir Aldrich remained silent for several moments. Finally, he answered, 30 years ago, I saw Black Hollow Abbey with my own eyes. Half the men who entered never returned." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. That night, unable to sleep, Thomas climbed the highest tower of Greyford Castle. Far away, beyond the forests, he saw it. 3 faint lights burning beside the distant ruins of Black Hollow Abbey. Then, the abbey bell rang. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound carried across the hills despite the storm. Thomas realized something. The letter had not been a warning. It had been an invitation, and someone was already waiting for him. At the first light of dawn, Sir Thomas Graham prepared for his journey. The sky remained heavy with dark clouds, and the roads were soaked from the previous night's rain. In the castle stable, Thomas saddled his loyal black horse, Shadow. Before he departed, Sir Aldrich handed him a small wooden cross. He spoke quietly. "If the darkness ever seems to guide your path, trust your conscience, not your eyes." Thomas looked at him. "Do you truly believe something waits inside Black Hollow Abbey?" Sir Aldrich sighed deeply. "I only know this. The Abbey hides the truth, and sometimes the truth is more terrifying than any monster." As the sun slowly rose, Thomas rode north alone. For hours he crossed forests, rivers, and lonely hills. Very few people traveled those roads. Whenever he mentioned Black Hollow Abbey, fear filled their faces. An old farmer warned him, "Leave that road before sunset, young knight. After dark, the forest belongs to things that are not meant to be seen." Thomas thanked the old man, but continued riding. By midday, he reached an ancient stone bridge stretching over a narrow stream. Sitting in the middle of the bridge was an old blind monk. He leaned upon a wooden staff. His eyes were clouded with age, yet somehow he seemed to know exactly who had arrived. Without turning his head, he said, "At last, Sir Thomas Graham." Thomas stopped immediately. "You know my name?" The monk smiled gently. "Those who hear the call of Black Hollow need no introduction." Thomas dismounted and approached him carefully. "Who are you?" The old man replied, "I am Brother Matthew, one of the last monks who once lived within Black Hollow Abbey." A chill ran through Thomas's body. "Then tell me, what happened there?" The monk remained silent for several moments. Finally, he whispered, "A single book. Hundreds of men died because of a single book." The wind suddenly became colder. Leaves rustled, although no breeze could be felt. Brother Matthew suddenly grabbed Thomas's wrist. His voice trembled. "Listen carefully. If you find a black door inside the abbey, never open it." Thomas frowned. "Why?" The monk slowly released his hand. "Because what waits beyond that door was never meant to enter this world again." Just then, the sound of horses echoed through the forest. Hooves pounded against the muddy ground. Thomas instantly drew his sword. 5 riders dressed entirely in black emerged from between the trees. Their faces were hidden beneath dark hoods. They carried no banners, no family crest, only silence. Finally, one of them spoke. "You received the letter." Thomas tightened his grip on his sword. "Who are you?" The rider answered calmly. "We are the keepers of the truth. For centuries we have protected it, and if necessary, we will kill for it." In one swift motion, all 5 riders drew their swords. Steel gleamed beneath the gray afternoon sky. Brother Matthew suddenly shouted, "No, not here." But it was already too late. The first masked rider spurred his horse forward, raising his sword high above his head. Thomas lifted his blade and stood his ground. He had no idea that this would not only be the first battle of his journey, it would also lead him one step closer to the darkest secret hidden inside Black Hollow Abbey.
The masked rider charged across the old stone bridge. His sword flashed beneath the gray sky. Thomas stepped forward. Their blades collided with a sharp clang that echoed through the silent valley. The force pushed Thomas back several steps. The rider was stronger than he had expected. Without giving him time to recover, 2 more horsemen attacked from opposite sides. Thomas ducked beneath one strike and blocked another. Steel clashed again. Sparks scattered across the wet stones.
Brother Matthew stood quietly beside the bridge. Although blind, he listened carefully to every movement. Then he suddenly shouted, "Thomas, the man on your left is pretending to attack. The real strike is coming from behind." Thomas reacted instantly. He spun around just as another rider swung his sword. The attack missed him by inches. Thomas countered with a quick strike, knocking the rider from his horse. The others immediately pulled back. The leader slowly removed his hood. He was an older man with silver hair and a long scar across his cheek. His cold eyes studied Thomas carefully. Then, to Thomas's surprise, he lowered his sword. Enough! The other riders obeyed without question. Thomas remained ready to fight. "Why have you stopped?" The stranger answered calmly. "Because we did not come here to kill you. We came to see if you were worthy." Thomas frowned. Worthy of what? The old warrior looked toward the distant mountains, where Black Hollow Abbey stood hidden beneath the mist. For 700 years, the greatest secret in England has remained hidden. Now, someone is trying to awaken it. Brother Matthew lowered his head. He whispered, "It has begun.
The old warrior reached into his cloak and removed a small silver key. Its handle was shaped like an ancient church bell. He handed it to Thomas. This is the key of silence. Without it, the doors beneath Black Hollow Abbey will never open. Thomas carefully accepted the key. It felt strangely warm in his hand.
Suddenly, the key began to glow. At the same moment, Brother Matthew gasped. His face turned pale. He slowly looked toward the northern forest. Although blind, it seemed he could sense something approaching. His voice trembled. "He's here." Thomas looked around. "Who?" The old monk whispered only 2 words. "The Raven Knight." A freezing wind swept across the valley. Dark clouds covered the afternoon sun. Every horse became restless. Even the birds fell silent. Then, a lone rider appeared on the hill. He wore black armor from head to toe. His face was hidden behind a raven-shaped helmet. A long black cloak flowed behind him. Across his back rested a massive sword, unlike any Thomas had ever seen. The mysterious knight stopped at the top of the hill. He said nothing. He simply watched. Then, in a deep, calm voice, he spoke. "Bring me the key." No one moved. The old warrior slowly stepped in front of Thomas. "Run. Do not look back." Thomas hesitated. "But what about you?" The old warrior smiled. "Some battles are fought to win. Others are fought simply to buy time." Without another word, Thomas mounted Shadow and galloped toward Black Hollow Abbey. Behind him, the sound of swords echoed through the valley. He never looked back. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, the dark silhouette of Black Hollow Abbey finally appeared before him. Its broken bell tower rose above the mist. Its massive wooden gates stood open, waiting for him. As the sun disappeared beyond the western hills, a thick blanket of mist settled around Black Hollow Abbey. Sir Thomas slowed his loyal horse, Shadow, as they approached the forgotten monastery. From a distance, the abbey looked even more haunting than before. Its broken bell tower reached toward the darkening sky. Ancient stone walls were covered with moss and climbing ivy. Yet somehow, it didn't feel abandoned. It felt as though someone was still watching over it. Thomas dismounted and stood before the enormous wooden gates. They were already half open. He carefully stepped inside. The moment he crossed the entrance, every sound from the outside world disappeared. No wind, no birds, no insects, only complete silence. It was as if time itself had stopped inside the abbey.
He entered the great prayer hall. Rows of broken wooden benches lay scattered across the stone floor. Old iron chandeliers hung from the ceiling, covered in dust. Melted candles rested on forgotten altars. Then something caught his attention. In the very center of the hall, a single candle was burning. Its flame was perfectly still. After centuries of abandonment, who had lit it? Suddenly, dong, the abbey bell rang once. Thomas froze. He looked around. No one was there. Again, dong. A second time. Then, dong. A third. Brother Matthew's warning echoed inside his mind. If you ever find a black door inside the abbey, never open it. At that exact moment, the key of silence in Thomas's hand began to glow with a soft golden light. The light slowly guided him toward the rear of the prayer hall. There stood an ancient stone statue holding a church bell. As Thomas stepped closer, the statue slowly moved aside by itself. Hidden beneath it was a narrow staircase leading deep underground. Thomas lit a torch and began his descent. Each stone step felt colder than the last. The air grew damp and heavy. After several minutes, he entered a vast circular chamber. Its walls were covered with mysterious carvings. A crowned king, a black book, hundreds of kneeling monks, and in the center of the chamber stood an enormous black stone door. In the middle of the door was a lock shaped like a bell. Thomas's heart pounded. Could this be the black door? He slowly walked toward it. Then, a voice emerged from the darkness. Take one more step, and you will regret it forever. Thomas instantly drew his sword. A shadow slowly stepped into the torchlight. It was an elderly man wearing the black robes of a monk. His eyes were completely white. He carried no weapon, only a wooden staff. The old man spoke calmly. For 300 years, I have guarded this door. Anyon who opens it will never be the same again. Thomas lowered his sword slightly. What lies beyond this door? The old guardian remained silent for a long moment. Finally, he answered, the truth. He looked directly toward Thomas. And the truth always demands a terrible price. Suddenly, the key of silence burst into brilliant golden light. The entire underground chamber began to shake violently. Rumble. Dust fell from the ceiling. The bell-shaped lock slowly turned by itself. The ancient black door began to open. The old guardian's face filled with fear. He shouted, "No, the time has not yet come." But it was already too late. The massive stone door continued to open. From the darkness beyond, a strange black light slowly emerged. Thomas realized he was standing before a secret that had been hidden from the world for centuries. And once that door opened completely, nothing in England would ever be the same again. The ancient black stone door groaned as it slowly opened. A cold wind poured from the darkness beyond. It was unlike any ordinary breeze. It carried the scent of damp stone, old parchment, and centuries of silence. Thomas tightened his grip on his torch. The golden light from the key of silence illuminated the narrow passage ahead. Without another word, the old guardian stepped aside. His face was filled with sorrow. Once you enter, there is no turning back. Thomas nodded. Some truths are worth every risk. Then he crossed the doorway. The passage stretched deep beneath the abbey. Its walls were carved with hundreds of strange symbols, ancient kings, fallen knights, burning castles, and a single black book that appeared again and again in every carving. After several minutes, Thomas reached an enormous underground library. Thousands of dusty books rested upon towering wooden shelves. Some had not been touched for centuries. The room was completely silent. Not even the sound of his own footsteps seemed to echo. In the very center stood a circular stone table. Upon it rested a single object, a large black leather book bound with silver chains. Its cover bore the same symbol that had appeared on the mysterious letter, the black bell. As Thomas approached, the key of silence began glowing brighter than ever before. The chains around the book slowly unlocked by themselves. Click, click, click. The final chain fell to the floor. Thomas hesitated. Brother Matthew's warning returned to his mind. Some secrets are hidden because mankind is not ready to know them. He slowly opened the first page. The parchment looked impossibly old, yet the writing appeared as clear as fresh ink. The first sentence read, "The crown protects the kingdom." Thomas turned another page. "The sword protects the crown." One more page. Then he froze. The next line read, "The bell protects the truth." His heart began to race. Someone had carefully hidden 3 great secrets across England, and Black Hollow Abbey protected only one of them. Suddenly, the torchlight flickered. A deep voice echoed through the library. "Close the book." Thomas spun around. No one was there. Again the voice spoke, louder this time. "You have already read too much." The shadows between the bookshelves began to move. One by one, dark figures emerged from the darkness. They wore long black robes. Their faces were hidden beneath ancient hoods. There were 12 of them, silent, motionless, watching him. The tallest figure stepped forward. He held an old lantern whose blue flame never moved. His voice was calm. "We are the Silent Brotherhood. For 700 years, we have guarded the Black Book." Thomas slowly lowered his sword. "Then tell me why I was brought here." The old monk answered, "Because the prophecy has begun." He pointed toward the open pages. Slowly, new words began appearing by themselves. Golden letters formed across the parchment. Thomas read them aloud. "When the bell rings 7 times, the Raven Knight shall awaken the forgotten king." The room fell silent. Thomas looked up. Who is the forgotten king? Before anyone could answer, the entire abbey shook violently. Boom! Dust rained from the ceiling. Far above, the great abbey bell rang again. Not once, not twice, but 4 times in rapid succession. The faces of every member of the Silent Brotherhood turned pale. The old monk whispered, "He's already here." Then, a deafening crash echoed from somewhere above. The main gates of Black Hollow Abbey had just been broken open. The Raven Knight had arrived. The thunderous crash of the abbey's main gates echoed through the underground library. Dust rained from the ancient ceiling. From somewhere above came the heavy sound of armored footsteps. Clang, clang, clang. Each step grew closer. The 12 members of the Silent Brotherhood fell to their knees in prayer. Their leader whispered, "The hour has finally come." Sir Thomas tightened his grip on his sword. He looked at the old monk. "Who is the Raven Knight?" The elder closed his eyes for a moment before answering. "Long ago, he was the greatest knight in the kingdom, but his hunger for power led him into darkness. He disappeared from history, yet his oath never ended." Suddenly, every torch inside the library went out. Only Thomas's torch and the key of silence continued to glow. A deep voice echoed through the darkness. "At last, the black book has been opened once again." Thomas turned toward the entrance. Standing in the doorway was a towering warrior clad entirely in black armor. His face was hidden beneath a helmet shaped like a raven. A long black cloak flowed behind him. Across his back rested an enormous black sword. This was the Raven Knight. He slowly walked forward. Every step shook the stone floor. He stopped only a few feet away from Thomas. Then he spoke. "Give me the key." Thomas stood his ground. "No." The Raven Knight let out a quiet laugh. "You have no idea what you are trying to protect." At that moment, the pages of the black book began turning by themselves, one page after another, until they stopped at an ancient illustration. It showed a vast underground tomb. At its center rested a massive stone coffin. Carved upon the lid was the image of a royal crown. Beneath it were the words, "When the 7th bell rings, the forgotten king shall awaken." Thomas felt his heart pound. The Raven Knight stared at the page. His voice was calm, yet filled with anticipation. "I have waited 700 years for this day. Today, the king will return." The old monk suddenly cried out, "No, he is not the rightful king. He is England's greatest curse." Before another word could be spoken, the Raven Knight swung his enormous sword. Crash! The massive stone table split cleanly in two. The black book fell to the floor. Thomas rushed forward and picked it up. Instantly, the key of silence blazed with brilliant golden light. New markings slowly appeared on the final page of the book. It was a map, a hidden passage leading far beneath the abbey. The old monk stared in disbelief. Impossible. The path to the royal tomb has finally revealed itself. The Raven Knight stepped closer. For the first time, excitement could be heard in his voice. "I searched for that passage my entire life. Now, it belongs to me." Thomas wasted no time. Holding the black book tightly against his chest, he sprinted toward the hidden tunnel shown on the map. Behind him, the heavy footsteps of the Raven Knight echoed through the darkness. As Thomas disappeared into the underground passage, he realized he was no longer running to save himself. He was racing toward a secret that had remained buried beneath England for centuries, and whatever awaited him there would decide the fate of the kingdom itself. Thomas raced through the hidden tunnel beneath Black Hollow Abbey, the black book clutched tightly against his chest. Behind him, the heavy footsteps of the Raven Knight echoed through the darkness. Every second, the distance between them grew shorter. The tunnel sloped downward, leading deeper beneath the mountain. The air became colder. The walls were covered with ancient carvings of crowned kings, broken swords, and church bells. After several minutes, Thomas reached an enormous bronze gate. Across its surface were carved 7 bells surrounding a single royal crown. As he stepped closer, the key of silence began to glow. Without touching the lock, the great gate slowly opened. A freezing wind rushed out. Beyond the gate lay an underground cathedral unlike anything Thomas had ever imagined. Hundreds of stone pillars stretched toward the darkness above. Countless candles burned without melting. In the center stood a magnificent stone coffin resting upon a raised platform. A golden crown had been carved into its lid. The black book suddenly opened by itself. Golden words slowly appeared across its pages. Only the one who chooses truth over power may awaken the rightful king, Thomas whispered. So, the prophecy was never about bringing back a dead king. Before he could think further, the Raven Knight entered the chamber. His black armor reflected the candlelight. He slowly drew his enormous sword. "Step away from the coffin." Thomas refused. "I won't let you rewrite England's history." The Raven Knight laughed. "History has always belonged to the strongest." Without warning, he attacked. Steel clashed across the silent cathedral. Their battle echoed beneath the mountain. As the fight continued, the stone coffin suddenly began to tremble. A deep crack spread across its lid. The entire chamber shook violently. Then, a hidden voice echoed through the darkness. "The seventh bell is about to ring." Thomas realized the true trial had only just begun. The underground cathedral trembled as another crack spread across the ancient stone coffin. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The candles flickered wildly, though no wind could be felt. Thomas and the Raven Knight slowly stepped away from each other, their eyes fixed upon the coffin. Then, the abbey bell rang again. Dong, the sixth bell. Only one remained. The black book suddenly rose into the air. Its pages turned rapidly by themselves. Golden letters appeared across the ancient parchment. "The last bell does not awaken the forgotten king. It awakens the truth buried with him." Thomas stared at the words. Then the prophecy was misunderstood. The Raven Knight shook his head. "No, I have waited too long to turn back now." With a furious cry, he charged toward the coffin. Before he could reach it, Thomas blocked his path. Their swords clashed once more. This battle was fiercer than any before. The Raven Knight's strength was overwhelming. Thomas was driven backward across the stone floor. His sword slipped from his hand. It skidded across the chamber. The Raven Knight raised his massive blade for the final strike. Then, a bright golden light burst from the coffin. The entire chamber was filled with blinding light. Both warriors were thrown backward. Slowly, the stone lid slid open by itself. Inside was no sleeping king, no skeleton, no treasure. Only a small wooden chest wrapped in royal blue cloth. Thomas approached carefully. He opened it. Inside lay an ancient royal crown, a silver ring, and a sealed parchment bearing the royal seal. Thomas broke the seal. The letter read, "To whoever finds this tomb, know this truth. The rightful king was never buried here. He escaped and chose peace over another civil war. This tomb was built to protect the truth, not a king." The Raven Knight stood frozen. Everything he had believed for 700 years was a lie. Just then, the abbey bell rang for the 7th time. Dong, the entire underground cathedral became silent. The black book slowly closed. Its cover turned to stone. Then it crumbled into dust. Its purpose had finally been fulfilled. The Raven Knight slowly lowered his sword. For the first time in centuries,
silence settled over the underground cathedral. The 7th bell had faded into history. The black book had turned to dust. Only the ancient crown, the silver ring, and the royal letter remained upon the stone altar. Thomas carefully picked up the crown. It was lighter than he had imagined. Inside the crown were engraved 4 words: "Truth is the greatest crown." Thomas looked at the Raven Knight. The once feared warrior stood motionless. His sword rested upon the stone floor. For the first time in centuries, doubt filled his heart. The old guardian slowly entered the chamber. He looked at the broken coffin and smiled sadly. "The kingdom has finally been freed from its oldest lie," Thomas asked. "Then why was the truth hidden for so many centuries?" The old guardian replied, "Because some people would have destroyed England to claim a throne that no longer existed." Suddenly, a violent earthquake shook the cathedral. Massive cracks spread across the walls. Stone pillars began collapsing. The old guardian raised his voice. "The abbey is falling. Once the truth was revealed, this place fulfilled its purpose." Thomas looked toward the exit. Huge stones had already begun blocking the passage. There was little time left. Without warning, the Raven Knight stepped forward. He lifted his enormous sword one last time. Thomas prepared himself, but instead of attacking, the Raven Knight struck a giant stone pillar. Crash! The falling pillar changed direction. It opened a narrow escape route through the collapsing chamber. Thomas stared at him in surprise. "Why are you helping me?" The Raven Knight removed his helmet. His face showed neither anger nor hatred, only peace. "Because England deserves the truth. Not my revenge." Thomas nodded with respect. The 2 men carried the ancient crown and the royal letter toward the escape tunnel. Behind them, the great underground cathedral collapsed forever. The secret of Black Hollow Abbey disappeared beneath the mountain, never to be hidden again. As Thomas stepped outside, the first rays of sunrise touched the abbey. For the first time in centuries, the old bell remained silent. Its duty was finally complete. The first light of dawn spread across the hills as Sir Thomas and the Raven Knight emerged from the collapsing abbey. Behind them, Black Hollow Abbey disappeared beneath falling stone and dust. Within minutes, nothing remained except broken ruins. The greatest secret in England had finally come to an end. Thomas carried the ancient crown and the royal letter to the king's castle. For 3 days, the royal council carefully examined the letter and the royal seal. At last, the oldest historian of the kingdom stood before the court and declared, "The letter is genuine. For centuries, England has lived under a false legend." Silence filled the great hall. Even the king lowered his head. The truth had finally been revealed. Several days later, the Raven Knight stood alone on a quiet hill overlooking the ruins of Black Hollow Abbey. Thomas approached him. "Where will you go now?" The old warrior smiled faintly. "For 700 years, I lived only for revenge. Now, I have nothing left except peace." He handed Thomas his black sword. "Guard England with honor. Never let power become more important than truth." As Thomas accepted the sword, the Raven Knight's black armor began to fade into golden light. Slowly, his body disappeared into the morning mist. Only his raven-shaped helmet remained upon the grass. Years later, Sir Thomas Graham became one of England's most respected knights. He never wore the ancient crown. Instead, he placed it inside a royal museum, where every citizen could see it. Beneath it was a simple inscription. "The greatest kingdom is built not by power, but by truth." The ruins of Black Hollow Abbey were left untouched. No one rebuilt it. No one searched beneath it again. People believed that on quiet autumn nights, when the wind passed through the old stones, the sound of a distant bell could still be heard, not as a warning, but as a reminder that truth can remain hidden for centuries. Yet sooner or later, it always finds its way into the light.
Thousands of years ago in ancient Egypt, in a small, weathered mud brick cottage along the banks of the Nile, lived a poor farmer named Amini. His life possessed no royal luxury nor any gold. His only wealth was a small piece of land by the riverbank, where he labored from dawn to dusk under the burning sun, planting wheat and barley. Today had been an exceptionally exhausting day. Amini spent hours turning the heavy soil with his wooden plow, carrying water from the river in leather buckets to nourish his crops. But now the sun has finally set. The intense heat of the desert begins to fade, replaced by a wonderfully cool, gentle breeze. Amini sat down on a small wooden stool outside his cottage. His body was heavy with fatigue, yet his mind felt completely at peace. He looked out at the majestic Nile. Under the moonlight, the water shimmered like liquid silver, flowing with a steady, unhurried grace. Along the banks, the tall, ancient palm trees swayed ever so gently, their leaves rustling with a faint, rhythmic whisper. At his feet, a small cat curled into a ball, falling into a peaceful sleep. One by one, the distant lights of the village were extinguished. The daily rush of life, the worries of tomorrow, and the exhaustion of hard labor all melted away into the vast darkness of the quiet desert. As the night grew deeper, Amini noticed that the breeze blowing from the desert was softer and unusually sweet, carrying the faint scent of ancient wild blossoms. Out of gentle curiosity, he stood up and walked past the boundaries of his field, stepping onto the open desert. The sand beneath his bare feet felt as soft and cool as silk. After walking a short distance between two massive sand dunes, Amini discovered a peculiar sight. Partially buried in the sand was the top of an ancient, smooth white stone pillar. The gentle wind was slowly shifting the grains of sand away from its surface, as if uncovering a secret frozen in time. Amini approached with slow, deliberate steps. He placed his rough, tired hand onto the cool surface of the stone. Remarkably, the moment his skin touched the cold stone, a wave of absolute calm washed over him. The aches in his body and the tiredness in his mind vanished instantly. This stone had stood here for centuries in total isolation, enduring the passage of time without moving an inch. Carved into its surface was a simple depiction of a flowing river, and an ancient symbol that meant, "He who finds stillness finds eternity." Amini sat down on the cool sand beside the pillar. He felt no fear, no rush. Only a profound, heavy silence embraced him. When Amini looked up, he saw that the desert sky had transformed into a vast velvet canopy, adorned with millions of brilliant, blinking stars. Each star seemed to pulse with a slow, soothing rhythm, as if singing a silent lullaby to the resting earth. From the distance, the gentle sound of the Nile's ripples hitting the shore drifted through the night air. The repetition of the sound created a natural, comforting cadence that made his eyelids grow incredibly heavy. Amini realized that though he was a poor man without a palace, the boundless peace of this ancient night belonged entirely to him. He slowly lay down upon the soft, cool sand. The desert wind brushed gently against his face. His breathing became slow, steady, and deep. The great river continued its eternal journey. The old desert stood watch in the darkness, and the poor farmer Amini drifted into a profound, uninterrupted slumber, resting peacefully under the watchful eyes of the stars. Everything is still, completely at peace. The sun has finally set over the vast golden horizon of the Sahara. The intense heat of the day begins to fade. replaced by a cool, gentle breeze that sweeps across the desert sands. As the twilight deepens, the sky transforms into a canvas of deep indigo and soft violet. The transition from day to night is slow, quiet, and deliberate. Along the banks of the historical Nile River, the tall, ancient palm trees sway ever so gently, their leaves rustling with a faint, rhythmic whisper. Pause for 3 seconds. The waters of the Nile flow silently, reflecting the first silver glimmers of the evening stars. For thousands of years, this river has been the heartbeat of Egypt, moving with a steady, unhurried grace. Tonight, the river is perfectly calm. The small wooden boats of the fishermen are tied to the wooden docks, bobbing up and down against the water. The gentle sound of the ripples hitting the shore creates a natural, soothing cadence. Miles away, rising from the desert floor, stand the great pyramids of Giza. They loom in the distance like massive, silent shadows against the starlit sky. These structures have stood for generations, watching centuries pass like grains of sand through an hourglass. The limestone blocks, heavy and weathered by time, hold the secrets of kings and architects whose names have long been forgotten. The desert around them is a vast ocean of stillness. The wind gently reshapes the dunes, moving individual grains of sand in total silence, smoothing out the landscape until it looks like a soft, endless blanket. If one were to step inside the grand gallery of the Great Pyramid, the silence would be absolute. Inside these stone walls, the air is perfectly still. No sound from the outside world penetrates this deep, calm quietness. The corridors are long, narrow, and cool, carved out of solid rock. On the walls, the ancient hieroglyphs remain frozen in time. Carvings of historical symbols, protective writings, and stories of ancient journeys. Here, time loses all meaning. There are no minutes, no hours, only the weight of eternity. In the nearby village, the daily rush of life has come to an end. The farmers, the weavers, and the scribes have all returned to their mud brick homes. The flickering light of oil lamps shines faintly through the small windows, casting a warm amber glow onto the quiet streets. One by one, these lamps are extinguished, plunging the village into a peaceful slumber. From the steps of a distant monument, the faint scent of traditional incense and herbs drifts into the night air. The guardians have completed their evening duties, reflecting on the harmony of the land and the cosmic balance of nature. The soft sounds have stopped, leaving only the gentle hum of the night. The sky above is now completely dark, a vast velvet canopy adorned with countless brilliant stars. The constellations look exactly as they did to the ancient astronomers who mapped them from the tops of these very stone structures. The cool desert air continues to move, carrying with it a sense of profound peace. Everything is still. The river continues its eternal journey. The pyramids stand watch in the darkness, and the ancient land of Egypt rests under the watchful eyes of the stars. A slow-motion, wide cinematic shot of the vast Sahara Desert dunes at night under a deep indigo sky. Cool wind gently shifting the soft sand grains, looping video. Bright full moon shining over endless waves of golden desert sand at night. Soft shadows, serene and completely silent atmosphere. 8K resolution. A distant view of a hidden green oasis appearing between two massive sand dunes at night. Soft, misty fog. Peaceful night environment. Tall, ancient palm trees at the edge of a desert oasis, swaying slowly in the cool night breeze. Clear, starry sky background. Calm mood. A wide shot of a crystal clear silver lake inside a desert oasis at night. Calm water reflecting millions of stars like diamonds. Cinematic lighting. Prompt. Close-up of tiny, gentle ripples of water hitting the soft shore of a lake at night. Rhythmic and soothing movement. Loopable video. Prompt. A magnificent ancient structure made of smooth white stone standing silently in the heart of the oasis under the starlit night sky. Historical archive look. Prompt. Looking down a long, narrow, and cool stone corridor inside an ancient building. Soft golden torchlight casting gentle shadows on the solid rock floor.
Here we see the convergence of the heavens and the earth. Detailed celestial maps alongside terrestrial boundaries. In this chamber, silence reigns, preserving the wisdom of ages past. Legend says that only under the pale moonlight can the true words of the ancients be read.
Gaze upon the velvet expanse, where millions of stars reveal the majestic beauty of the Milky Way above us.
Millions of stars, each one a distant sun, shining down on us from the velvet darkness of space. Under the cool silver moon, the wind guides the shifting sands in a mesmerizing, endless flow.
For centuries, these ancient stones have watched the stars turn.
Here, where the spring meets the lake, the water moves slowly, a calming rhythm in the heart of the wilderness. A vast and quiet land, resting peacefully under the endless stars.
Exactly 100 years ago, in the year 1926, in a small mountainous village, lived a young orphan named Anand. Anand was extremely kind, hearted but deeply impoverished. One day, while cleaning the old library of the village landlord's mansion, he found a strange silver pocket watch hidden inside a crack in the wall. It was no ordinary watch. It didn't tick, but instead emitted a soft melodic tune. The moment Anand touched the watch, the air around him seemed to freeze. He realized this watch was calling him toward an unknown destiny. The hands inside the watch suddenly began to indicate directions like a compass. With only a water flask and a small amount of dry food as his belongings, Anand set out on a long journey. He had to cross dense, dark forests where the roars of wild animals constantly terrified him. Next, he had to traverse a vast, scorching desert. Even when his throat was parched with thirst, he refused to give up. Along the way, he faced many temptations. Many sorcerers offered him immense wealth in exchange for the watch, but Anand held on to his honesty. This long journey, spanning over years, exhausted him mentally and physically, but the good soul inside him never wavered. Finally, after long hardships, Anand arrived at the peak of a massive snow-covered mountain. Hidden there was an abandoned, cursed palace. Upon entering the palace, he saw a stone statue with a hollow space in its chest, exactly the size of the silver watch. As Anand went to place the watch into the hollow, a mystical witch appeared. The witch said, "If you place this watch here, you will turn into stone, but all mankind will be freed from disease and poverty." Anand did not hesitate for a single moment. Disregarding his own life, and thinking only of the welfare of humanity, he placed the watch into the statue's chest. But the very next moment, a miracle happened. A brilliant light illuminated everything. Anand did not turn into stone. Instead, the witch, like mystical entity, transformed into a benevolent angel. The angel smiled and said, "I was only testing your selflessness. Despite countless hardships, you did not lose your honesty and were ready to give your life for others." With the angel's blessing, the old palace transformed into a golden palace. All of Anand's exhaustion vanished, and he was proclaimed the king of a vast kingdom. Not only that, but because of Anand's selfless sacrifice, long-lasting peace and prosperity descended upon the entire world. Anand spent the rest of his life serving the people, and thus, after a long and difficult journey, the story reached a beautiful and happy ending.
Exactly 100 years ago, in the year 1926, in a foggy mountainous village located in a remote region of India, lived a calm and patient young man named Samir. Samir loved spending hours in old libraries. One day, in a dark corner of the library, inside a hidden, dusty drawer, he found an ancient leather-bound diary. Opening the diary, he was astonished. It described a lost mystical valley that becomes visible to human eyes for only a brief period every 100 years. Following the map, Samir entered a forest so dense that sunlight had never touched its ground. The forest was utterly silent, except for the occasional soft rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of crickets. Samir walked for days and nights continuously. The trees inside this forest were colossal, covered in a strange, glowing blue moss that dispelled the darkness of the night with a soft, soothing light. As he walked, his shoes tore apart, and his physical strength began to deplete rapidly. Yet, he did not stop. When he finally sat down under a massive tree out of exhaustion, a mystical deer appeared before him. The deer's eyes were as bright as stars, seemingly waiting to guide Samir. Samir stood up once more and began to follow the gentle glow. This walk was incredibly long and lonely, testing the absolute limits of his patience. As the forest ended, a vast, endless desert stretched before Samir. But this was no ordinary desert. There was no wind and absolutely no sound. It was known as the Desert of Silence. Walking through here, all of a person's negative thoughts, fears, and past sorrows would manifest in their mind. When Samir reached the middle of the desert, he envisioned all the lost memories and hardships of his life. He felt as though he wouldn't survive, that all this long suffering might be in vain. Right then, he touched the diary in his pocket and calmed his mind. Closing his eyes, he took a deep, steady breath, conquered his fears, and moved forward. At the very edge of the desert, he found a massive stone gate shrouded in thick fog. An old gatekeeper sat before it. The old man said, "To pass through this gate, you must sacrifice the most valuable thing you possess." Samir smiled and handed over his beloved ancient diary, knowing that reaching the destination was more important than holding on to the guide.
As the stone gate ground open, Samir's eyes were dazzled. He found himself standing in a heavenly valley. All around, rivers of deep blue water flowed, emitting a supernatural soothing fragrance. Nestled on the mountain slopes was an ancient city, where houses made of gold and crystal glistened in the warm evening light. The people of the city were incredibly kind, with no trace of sorrow on their faces. The moment they saw Samir, they welcomed him with immense warmth. Hearing the story of Samir's honesty,
Enduring patience and ultimate sacrifice, the king of the valley embraced him. The king proclaimed that Samir would be the new guardian of this valley. Instantly, all of Samir's exhaustion, the wounds on his feet, and the long-held sorrows of his mind vanished. He spent the rest of his life in absolute happiness within that calm, magical city. Peace reigned over the entire world, and thus, after a tremendously long, difficult, yet beautiful journey, Samir's life reached a deeply peaceful and happy ending.